Following the 1896 presidential election, the administration of Republican William McKinley took steps to place numerous black individuals in postmastership roles across the southern United States. This move was executed during the remaining period of his tenure and was part of a strategy to establish local networks through patronage appointments. However, the implementation of these appointments encountered significant opposition from local white populations, particularly in the southern states. This opposition stemmed from the deep-seated resentment held by many white individuals towards any black officeholders affiliated with the Republican Party. The situation was further exacerbated when such appointments were made by an outgoing administration. The primary concern expressed by white opponents was the fear that granting political power to black postmasters would embolden them to engage in improper relationships with white women. One instance of this conflict unfolded in 1897 when Frazier B. Baker, a 40-year-old married schoolteacher with 6 children, was designated as the postmaster of Lake City, South Carolina. Baker's appointment immediately ignited intense resistance from local white conservative Democrats who were predominant in Lake City despite the surrounding Williamsburg County having a 63% black population. In contrast, Lake City had very few black residents, numbering less than a dozen. The white community initiated a boycott of the Lake City post office and circulated petitions demanding the removal of Baker from his post. One of the grievances raised against Baker was his decision, as a member of the Colored Farmers Alliance, to reduce mail delivery frequency from 3 times a day to only 1. This decision was driven by threats to Baker's life that had been made. In response to the mounting complaints, a postal inspector was dispatched to investigate the situation. The inspector's recommendation was to close down the Lake City post office. Seizing on this, a group of white individuals formed a mob and set fire to the post office building. They believed that this act would dissuade anyone from renting space for a post office, while Baker retained his position. Despite this destructive action, the government managed to secure an alternative location on the outskirts of the town. As racial tensions somewhat eased, Baker decided to reunite his family in February 1898. However, even after his family's arrival, Baker continued to receive threats against his life, indicating that the hostility towards his presence persisted within the white community. In response to these threats, Baker communicated the situation to his superiors in Washington, highlighting the ongoing challenges he faced in carrying out his role as postmaster. At 1 a.m. on February 21, 1898, the Baker family was abruptly awakened as flames engulfed their house, which also functioned as the local post office. Faced with the rapidly spreading fire, Frazier Baker made a valiant attempt to extinguish it, but his efforts were in vain. In desperation, he dispatched his son, Lincoln, to seek assistance. However, as soon as Lincoln opened the door, a barrage of gunfire greeted him, forcing Baker to quickly pull him back inside the house. In the face of the escalating chaos, Baker directed his frustration and anguish at the mob responsible for the violence and then turned to prayer. The flames raged with increasing intensity, enveloping the surroundings in searing heat. At this dire moment, Baker turned to his wife, Lavinia, and expressed a sentiment of defiance in the face of the impending danger. He conveyed that they might as well attempt to escape rather than passively succumbing to the situation. With resolve, Baker headed towards the door. However, tragedy struck before Baker could open the door. A single bullet, tragically aimed at Lavinia, who held their 2-year-old daughter, Julia, took the life of the young child. The heart-wrenching loss propelled Baker into action. He flung the door open, only to be met with a hail of gunfire that cut short his life. Lavinia, wounded by the same fatal shot that claimed her daughter's life, displayed remarkable strength. Despite her injuries, she rallied her surviving family members and guided them to flee the burning house. They raced across the road, seeking refuge beneath shrubbery in an adjacent field. Concealed there, they anxiously waited for the tumultuous combination of flames and gunfire to abate. After what must have felt like an eternity, Lavinia made a cautious journey to a neighbor's house, where she found one of her daughters already seeking refuge. Eventually, they were joined by their eldest daughter, Rosa. Rosa, bearing a gunshot wound in her right arm, recounted how she had escaped the house while being pursued by an unidentified armed white man. Of the Baker family members, only Sarah, age 7, and Millie, age 5, emerged from the ordeal unharmed. Despite their injuries and trauma, the survivors remained in Lake City for 3 days. However, during this time, they received no medical attention, underscoring the dire circumstances they faced. The lynching prompted a widespread outpouring of condemnation, not only locally but also reverberating across the entire southern region. However, there were those who defended the lynching, echoing the sentiments of South Carolina's Senator Benjamin Tillman. Tillman contended that the people of Lake City, animated by a sense of pride, vehemently rejected the notion of receiving their mail from a black individual. Prominent journalist Ida B. Wells Barnett vigorously decried the lynching, pointing out a notable difference from typical lynchings where mobs often feigned accusations of wrongdoing. In this case, the lynchers didn't even make a pretense of Baker having committed any crime. At a mass protest held in Chicago, she openly ridiculed the lynching perpetrators, referring to them as Southerners who boasted of their chivalrous behavior towards women. To amplify the collective voice against the atrocity, Wells Barnett conveyed the resolutions adopted during the protest to President McKinley. She argued that Baker's murder wasn't simply a local matter but rather a federal concern. She drew a parallel between Baker's death and the sacrifice of a soldier on a battlefield, asserting that he had died in the line of duty while defending the honor of the nation. McKinley assured her that an investigation into the matter was already in progress. While in Washington, Wells Barnett also took the opportunity to implore Congress to extend support to the surviving members of the Baker family. Regrettably, despite her efforts, legislators encountered formidable opposition primarily from the Democrats and the nearly unanimous bloc of the Solid South. This resistance prevented the authorization of the proposed support, revealing the complex political landscape that hindered humanitarian action. A grand jury was assembled in Williamsburg County, yet it proved unable to return any indictments in connection with the case. Under the McKinley administration, a thorough investigation into the murder was undertaken. Initially, a substantial reward of $1,500 was offered for information leading to the apprehension and conviction of those responsible for the mob's actions. This proactive approach led to the indictment of 7 men on July 1, 1898, despite the reluctance of witnesses to provide testimony. Eventually, a total of 13 individuals faced indictments in the U.S. Circuit Court. These charges encompassed offenses such as murder, conspiracy to commit murder, assault, and the destruction of mail. This legal action transpired on April 7, 1899, after 2 individuals, Joseph P. Newham and Early P. Lee, chose to collaborate with the prosecution, resulting in their own charges being dropped. The federal trial took place from April 10 to April 22, 1899. The defendants in this case included Alonzo Rogers, Charles D. Joyner, Edwin Rogers, Ezra McKnight, Henry Godwin, Henry Stokes, Marion Clark, Martin Ward, Moultrie Epps, Oscar Kelly, and W. A. Webster. A jury of all-white businessmen drawn from different parts of the state was impaneled for the trial. The key prosecution witness, Newham, admitted his involvement in starting the fire and identified 8 defendants as participants in the murders. Strikingly, he displayed no remorse for the tragic deaths of Baker and his daughter. Another witness, M. B. Springs, singled out Henry Stokes as the leader of the group. Springs faced social ostracism in Lake City due to his testimony and was subsequently placed under police protection. Henderson Williams, an African-American witness, bravely testified that he had witnessed armed white men at the post office on the night of the lynching. In response to his testimony, he faced threats and decided to flee to Florence after a white business partner ominously warned him of a fate akin to Baker's. After approximately 24 hours of deliberation, the jury declared a mistrial due to a deadlock in reaching a verdict. The jury split evenly at 5-5. Unfortunately, the case was never retried. Following the mistrial, the white residents of Lake City sought to have the post office reopened and mail services reinstated. However, many African Americans viewed this request as hypocritical, given the gruesome events that had transpired in connection with the post office. On May 2, 1898, a mass assembly convened at the Emmanuel AME Church in Charleston, South Carolina. During this gathering, a resolution was unanimously passed, condemning the heinous attack. Displaying their solidarity with the Baker family, the congregation collected a sum of $16 as a contribution for their support. Lavinia Baker and her 5 surviving children chose to prolong their stay in Charleston following the trial's conclusion. During this period, Lillian Clayton Jewett orchestrated a meeting between Lavinia and Dr. Alonzo C. McClellan, a Charleston-based physician heading a committee tasked with overseeing the Bakers' well-being. Through their discussions, an agreement was reached for Lavinia to accompany Jewett to Boston. Facilitated by Jewett and Dr. Lucy Hughes Brown, a colleague of Dr. McClellan, Lavinia and her children undertook the journey to Boston. However, a rift emerged between Baker and Jewett after a series of public appearances. A new development ensued as William Lloyd Garrison, Jr. spearheaded fundraising efforts aimed at securing a residence near Boston for the Baker family. This initiative led to divergent views between Baker and Jewett. The Baker family found residence in Boston, choosing to withdraw from public life. Tragically, the surviving Baker children fell prey to a tuberculosis epidemic, resulting in the loss of 4 children, William, Sarah, Lincoln, and Cora, between the years 1908 and 1920. The last surviving child of Lavinia Baker, Rosa Baker, endured until 1942 before passing away. This marked the conclusion of an era for the Baker family, as the entire next generation had succumbed to various adversities. In the wake of immense personal loss, Lavinia Baker made her way back to Florence County. There, she resided until her eventual passing in Cartersville, South Carolina, in 1947. With the profound tragedy of losing all her children, Lavinia Baker's life journey reached a somber conclusion.